Hello and welcome to another video. Today I wanted to talk about a bit more of an in-game topic in skill shots. So how do we approach those? And I got that idea because I was just deciding what to play a little bit. No, somehow I decided to play Xerath for a bit and I realized that this champ is pretty good. And there are a lot of champs that are like pretty good right now with skill shots. Say like Xerath is quite good, Nidalee is quite good, Ziggs is always like pretty decent. Ezreal is like pretty decent. Cortis is like known for being quite good, and so on. And I thought maybe a video on what you can do to make sure to hit as many skill shots as possible would help some of you out. So that's why I'm gonna go over one game and try to show you like examples of the things I want to talk about. So there are mainly three kinds of things that I want to talk about, kinda. So those being the way that you use your spells. So a lot of skill shot champs have spells designed either to be hit or to not be hit. So for example, Nidalee's Spear is designed to not be hit at high range, right? Same way like Xerath Q is designed to not really be hit, and so on, right? Cortis Q as well. Without CC, these spells are not designed to be hit, right? That's why these champs usually have setup. So, for example, with the example of Xerath, we have his W, right? So, this champion, what you always end up doing, whenever it's possible, is use W and then you use Q and E, right? With Cortis, use W and then you use Qs, right? Or like Exhaust and then you use Qs. With Ziggs, you like place your E, that spell's not meant to be hit, you know? And like, your Q is not fully meant to be hit. But you use your W to make sure that the enemy is knocked into your E, which also slows them, which makes it impossible to miss your Q, basically. So, I'll also go a bit over support laning phase as a poke champion, and I think Pyke is an interesting matchup because this is a matchup that is more disliked by people. So you just start W because easier spell to hit. You're just kind of guaranteed to hit it. And then we go E second, because then we can actually play all in with a Kaitha. If you actually fight, then E is like pretty good. And okay, so we get that, right? We have to wait until this guy's E is like timing out so he doesn't like flash. Just make it as hard as possible for him to like flash and CC as well. But it wouldn't really matter here because even if not, you wouldn't get it. But it's like, okay, whatever. Maybe could have been better, maybe could have been worse. Whatever, sure. I don't really mind this too much because enemy jungler does play to top side, so I'm like, whatever. Then, so these skill shots, right? Like these types of skill shots, this is an even better reason as for why I picked this game. These champions, like Pyke, also have the same idea, right? You just want to hit something, but when someone disappears like this, right? There are two types of people. Either you realize it is spirit or you don't, right? And if you realize it, then just make them waste their spells. And the problem is that these types of spells are really hard to hit. When the enemy is like out in the open, a line type spell, these spells are kind of balanced around you hitting them when the enemy is closer than like 60-70% of the range of the spell, right? So if we look at this Pyke spell, this Q, right? Where is it meant to be hit? The spell is meant to be hit around like here, right? Like this is around where you want to hit the spell. Like somewhere in this zone. Because if the enemy is like somewhere in this zone, it's really hard for him to actually dodge it. But if the enemy is like more towards like here, then it's like pretty simple for him to walk any of these directions, right? As long as he doesn't walk into it. And he can be fine. And it's quite a large difference in the amount of time they actually react, right? But you see, like, same idea. Okay, just W. Okay, wait, we need to get level 3. Okay, so we're level 3, right? So open W and just Q, right? But the enemy, look at their move speeds, right? 250, 248. You can't really dodge spells in that situation, right? And this is what I'm trying to really demonstrate. Most skill shot champs have a way for you to set up your skill shots, right? So it's like risk against reward and stuff like that. But a lot of them do end up having a way to like set it up. So for example, Pike can double you closer to you. That's also a way of setting it up. Then Nidalee can either pick favorable positions, or she can jump into you, and then she is melee. And the closer she is, obviously, the easier it is to hit, right? And the missile speeds and stuff are also adjusted, so it ends up like being pretty decent. Some spells are obviously more meant to be hit than others, but yeah. So what else can we keep in mind, right? The other thing to keep in mind, other than like the setting up thing, is secondly, how the terrain affects where people can go, right? So for example, here, if we look at these players, these people are making like two key things that make it so that Kai'Sa wants to W, right? Firstly, they're stacking, so that means that she has double the chance of hitting someone if she fires a spell here, so that's just great, right? And secondly, they're next to terrain, so that means they can only go like this way to dodge, like anywhere here, right? But if they walk like this way or this way, then they're just fucked. If they walk like this way, they might also be fucked. If they walk like this way, well, they can't because there's a tower there, right? So it just doesn't work. So someone ends up taking a spell like this whenever this stuff happens, right? And you just can't play the game. So, okay. These two things are something, right? But then what else goes into the spells, right? We can't always CC enemy. We can't always do like the other stuff, right? So then, other than that, obviously there's the positional aspect I just talked about, and also how close you are to the enemy. But lastly, for trying to hit spells, we have the idea where you want to kind of send a few spells, especially if you have like spammable spells, right? You want to send a few spells that just test which way the enemy prefers to dodge, right? So if you test which way the enemy prefers to dodge, let's say that I am on vision right now, right? Like the Varus knows I'm here, right? Like if I throw a spell from here, then he will either dodge like left or right, right? And if I do this like 2-3 times, most people have a pattern of how they dodge, but you have to recognize what the pattern is, right? And there isn't only one of these patterns. Oh my god, I have to begin full screen. Okay, but there isn't only one of these patterns, right? So firstly, there can be a pattern that just says like, okay, they prefer to go like one side or the other, right? Like they prefer some directions over others. So these patterns are really easy to read, right? In that situation, you just start throwing it the other way. And for most people, I mean, I'm assuming you're not like above master since you're watching this. I mean, if you're above master, then it still exists, but at least people can somewhat control it. So in that case, you just throw the spell where they always dodge, and they will end up walking into it, right? And you'll benefit a lot. Even if they at some point stop doing that, you can just readjust. Then other than this, though, other than the regular directional preferences they have, there's also a preference as to do they prefer to dodge aggressively or defensively, right? So, okay, let's say that there's a guy who is right here, right? With a line type skill shot. And then there's a guy who is right here, right? Who wants to dodge, right? I don't know, ADC or whatever. This can be Ari or Zerat or whatever, right? So it kind of changes based on the champ you are as well as the line-based skill shot and the other champ. But people will either have a heavy preference towards going here or towards going like here or towards going here. So if they're like really low elo, they'll probably go here. Or if they just like want to like play chicken with you, I guess. But I'm gonna talk about the other two preferences more. So the mindset with these things is kind of like, okay, this is just like the reflex-based dodge that most people have, and this is like the reflex-based dodge that most people have who play like more aggressively, right? So this one is more like defensive, and this one is more aggressive. And why is that? Well, the aggressive one is like obviously self-explanatory because they're going into, but why is this defensive rather than being like neutral or something, right? Because this is not really defensive. This is defensive. Well, this is defensive because you're afraid of losing something, right? So you're like pressured, and that's where you end up dodging in the scenario. And that's like basically the psychology behind it. And if you understand that psychology, then you can kind of read from the enemy clicks, from the enemy movements, from the enemy like gameplay all game, which way they're really going to choose to go, right? And this last direction is kind of just like, okay, well, I don't believe you're gonna do it, you know, that kind of thing. But then also it does change based on like the type of champs you play, right? So for example, if I'm playing Ari and I just ulted in once, right? Like for me, there isn't really an issue with me like using E like this, right? And just predicting that you will go like defensive. Like, and then maybe if you go this way, then I'll still get you, you know? There isn't really an issue with it for me. Actually, it's better if I like demonstrate like this, because then they can't like walk like this. So it has to be like this, or this, right? So if I do this and I miss, I will just ult out, right? But now if I'm Xerath, it kind of changes. Because now, if I do this E, right? If I do this E, then if you dodge in, you will probably kill me, right? If you're like an ADC or something. But if I do this E, and then I see you dodge like the other way, I can still walk away, right? So because of this stuff, you can also expect skill shots more, but also people will try to play it differently, right? So then if the enemy realizes this, right, then when you're Xerath, they're more likely to dodge this way. Or, yeah, you know, because you have to throw it like this usually. And opposite way, if you're Ari, they might just like walk another way, right? Like they are likely to walk like this because you're kind of like an assassin threat type champion. So with stuff like this, you can also get a little bit of an extra edge. And these things you will also end up seeing, not just based on how they dodge, but based on how they play the whole game, right? Like if someone is always trying to go into you whenever there's like an opportunity, they're likely to be one of those that dodge like more aggressively, right? But obviously context matters in the situations and stuff. So, okay. We got through that stuff. So what is the last thing that I want to talk about today? It is about choosing when to time your skill shots, or rather when to cast them, right? So I don't know if this is a good example of it. I need to see this real quick. It's like, okay. So here, for example, we chose to like, okay, we let him get feared first, so he gets CC'd, and then we use our skill shots. But this is kind of boring because in this scenario, you don't really see the point of it because it's just like waiting for CC. So a scenario that makes a bit more sense is not this one either. This one? I know it's one of these, so I'll find it. Not this one either. Oh, it's probably this one. Okay. So in different scenarios, you get to play with your skill shots in different ways, and the enemy will play around them in different ways, both based on how you've been playing this game and how fed you are and so on. So here, for example, a lot of people will make one of two mistakes. Either one, they will try to E before this guy E's, in which case it'll be like, okay, I guess, like maybe you hit it if you're lucky, but the problem is even if you hit it, he can just buffer the E through your E, so he won't really be CC'd. So kind of an issue, right? And second, they might like try to insta cast it after his E, right? In which case it can also still be problematic because you're not really sure how it ended, right? You want to cast it like with a slight delay as he gets to the end, you know? Because like here he could still like move a lot, right? But then he's committed kind of. And that's the best way to like end up hitting these more mobile champs and stuff. Like when they're having to commit to something, you know, or make a choice. I have like another example in a different replay that I can actually show. So I'll open that up real quick as well. Okay, so I want to like be one lane, blah blah. These are like master games, so it's not like too high elo, but I mean I don't know, wait. Like let's see. these people are 51 something something. Oh wait, this is the low game. This is the low game. Oh yeah, but let's take like a 200 LP one or a 200-ish LP one. So this is like 0.2%. So okay, 99.8% of you should be lower than this, I suppose. So with these champions, it's like really kind of difficult to hit them, right? Because they have a lot of dashes. So okay, this is actually not the best example of it because I don't have my E. Okay, maybe not this one then. When was it? Like, okay, these types of champs, right? So these types of champs, you try to either hit during their dash, or you try to hit them when they have to make an actual choice, right? Because like you make it so it's a neutral or a negative for them, right? So like here, he still has like some amount of choices, right? But the issue for him is that if I actually threw it a bit too high. I should throw it more like this. Because if I throw it like this, then there's no dash he can do in this direction where he won't get stunned, right? Maybe if he like really hugged the wall here, he could have. That's why I'm saying I should have thrown it more like here in hindsight. But yeah, there's no way he can dash this way, right? And then if he can't dash this way, then there's no way I'm dying, right? And that's the only thing he can really achieve here, because there's nothing else for him to achieve. Like, Ezreal's going to die regardless. He could try to save Janna, I suppose. But that doesn't really matter for me, right? Like, if he saves the Janna or not. Because I don't really have an impact on that, right? Like, what am I gonna do? Like, if that guy decides to dash towards the Janna and block the Ezreal spells, then there isn't much I can do about that, right? So, what you do have to focus on is the stuff that you can do, right? So, when people have to make decisions, right? And that's why terrain is so important in League. So, like, there are some points where people just have to make a decision. Like, for example, here or here, right? Like, how exactly you're gonna walk. You have to decide at that point, right? And there's usually an optimal way for you to walk, and if you don't walk that way, then oftentimes situations go in a bad direction. And also, obviously, like the thing I said where you throw it during their dashes, you throw it while they're in skills, and so on. Or when they're trying to achieve something. But yeah, I think this is like a general overview of how you can do better on skill shots, and also kind of tells you what to avoid so you don't get hit by everything. Because like the games that I've been playing, I don't know, like people just get hit by everything. So I don't know, maybe it's an issue. Either way, you can look more into this stuff yourself, and there are more people who made educational stuff on this stuff. Otherwise, if I feel like it, maybe I'll make more of these and just make them more specific to each topic. But this is a general guide, sort of like a table of contents for what you need to study for skill shots. Okay, if you enjoyed the video, then like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye. Peace.